I have to take care of this truck because this truck takes care of me. And it's a partnership, and that's why I take care of it.
The frozen highways that made Ice Road Truckers one of the most watched reality shows in the history of the History Channel were dangerous enough when the cameras were rolling. Loads that could crack the ice beneath them, temperatures that dropped to 60 below zero, roads that existed for only a few months each year before the spring thaw swallowed them back into the lake. But what happened to people who drove those roads after the cameras stopped turned out to be just as dramatic, just as dangerous, and in some cases far darker than anything the show ever broadcast. Some of the men and women who became household names on those frozen highways are no longer alive. One ended up in legal jeopardy following an incident that nearly destroyed his home and badly injured his body. Another's career was ended by an accident that had nothing to do with ice at all. And at least one found himself haunted by a crash on an ordinary road that left 2 people dead and cost him something no clearance of guilt could give back. These are the real stories of the Ice Road Truckers cast in 2025, and they are stranger, sadder, and more complicated than most fans ever knew. Daryl Ward was the kind of television personality who made you feel like you were riding along with a friend rather than watching a stranger on a screen. He was born on August 13, 1964, in Montana, and he grew up around trucks in the literal sense. His family ran harvest rigs, and he spent decades in the trade long before any television producer ever came looking for him. By the time he joined Ice Road Truckers in Season 6, he had the specific combination of skill, self-deprecating humor, and genuine fearlessness that the show had been built to showcase. Fans loved his backward cap and his grin, and the way he could make a situation that should have been terrifying feel somehow manageable, even entertaining. Off camera, he fought forest fires and organized community initiatives and lived by a personal motto, any road, any load. That was not performance, but a genuine reflection of how he approached his life. His death on August 28, 2016, while returning from a Great American Truck Show with his co-pilot Mark Malott, came without warning and without a satisfying explanation. The plane they were traveling in veered sharply before hitting trees, and investigators were never able to determine with certainty why. What made the loss even harder for people who followed his career was the timing. Daryl had been preparing to launch a documentary project about plane wrecks, a creative endeavor that was cut short at the precise moment it was about to begin. The man who made frozen lake crossings feel survivable did not survive an ordinary flight home. Art Burke arrived on Ice Road Truckers in Season 7, carrying the magnetic energy of a Canadian driver who looked like he had been born for exactly this kind of work. He appeared in 38 episodes across 4 seasons and built a fan base that responded to his scrappy personality and genuine skill on the ice. The trouble came after the cameras stopped. Burke, who had never been especially cautious in his approach to anything, attempted to produce a cannabis concentrate at home using butane, a highly flammable liquid that requires careful control conditions to handle safely. A spark turned the experiment catastrophic. Neighbors reported feeling the explosion from blocks away. Burke suffered second-degree burns across 40% of his body and spent nearly 2 weeks in a hospital. The damage to his home exceeded $60,000. In 2020, he pleaded guilty to arson by negligence and faced house arrest, restitution payments, and the forced sale of his rig to cover what he owed. Even his appearances in court carried the stubborn independent streak that made him compelling on television. He arrived late to his sentencing hearing and challenged the scheduled proceedings in a way that visibly tested the judge's patience. He continues to post videos related to trucking under a different name, but people who followed him for years have noted that something in him changed after the explosion, that the easy confidence the cameras captured has been replaced by something heavier and more careful. Hugh Rowland occupied a central place in the early seasons of Ice Road Truckers as the gravelly-voiced, no-nonsense driver known to fans and colleagues alike as the Polar Bear. He was one of the first genuine stars the show produced, and his combination of technical skill and deadpan humor gave the program a personality that helped establish its audience. His own story about agreeing to participate was characteristically unimpressed by the prospect of television fame. He told producers that they could put cameras in his trucks, but to stay out of his way because nobody was going to watch them driving up and down ice roads anyway. He was wrong about the audience, but his attitude was genuine. The event that ended his career in front of cameras had nothing to do with frozen lakes or dangerous loads. In 2014, while riding as a passenger in a vehicle driven by a producer named Will Morrison, The SUV veered off a narrow dirt road and rolled over. Roland sustained severe spinal injuries and a shattered left heel. The recovery took 2 years, and the physical damage proved permanent in ways that reshaped the rest of his life. He filed a lawsuit against the producer, alleging reckless driving, and the legal battle combined with his injuries pushed him out of the show's world entirely. The accident also put significant strain on his marriage, contributing eventually to its breakdown. He still appears at truck shows and still signs autographs for fans who remember what he was at his peak, and he runs a construction company that has kept him active and productive. But he has not returned to ice roads, and the combination of physical reality and personal loss means he likely never will. Mark Kohakewicz represents a different kind of story, one built not on personal drama or misfortune, but on the quieter and in some ways more demanding work of building something that actually lasts. As the man behind Polar Industries, a Winnipeg-based trucking operation that takes on some of Canada's most extreme northern freight routes, Mark appeared on Ice Road Truckers from Season 5 onward in a role that required him to manage operations rather than simply drive them. His interest in northern freight began long before cameras arrived. As a university student, he and a friend pushed progressively farther into remote winter territory on ice fishing trips, noticed a volume of freight moving through places most people never saw, and began asking whether there was a business in hauling supplies to communities that had no other reliable way to receive them. What started with 21 loads in the first year eventually reached more than 700 annually, serving remote communities and First Nation settlements that depend on ice roads not for adventure, but for survival. His most publicly recognized moment came in 2017 when a washed-out railroad line to Churchill, Manitoba, cut the town off from essential supplies. Mark coordinated the construction of an emergency ice road to deliver fuel, food, and necessities before Christmas, with crews working 14 to 18-hour days under conditions that left no margin for the kind of errors that are quietly recoverable in more forgiving environments. Since the show ended, his story has generated none of the headlines attached to some of his former castmates. No fires, no legal proceedings, no accidents. Just the ongoing and genuinely demanding work of keeping freight moving through one of the harshest environments on Earth. Todd Dewey built his reputation on Ice Road Truckers as one of the fastest and most technically precise drivers the show had featured, a man whose skill spoke loudly enough that he rarely needed to raise his voice to establish his credibility. He joined in Season 7 and quickly became a favorite for viewers who appreciated competence over spectacle. The event that changed his life did not happen on a frozen Canadian highway. In January 2019, while hauling spruce logs near Shelton, Washington, a sedan crossed the center line, and the resulting collision was immediately fatal for both occupants of the car, a 65-year-old man and a 64-year-old woman. Todd was not physically seriously injured, but he walked away from that scene carrying something that clearance from investigators could not remove. The RCMP determined that black ice and excessive speed on the part of the other driver were responsible for the collision, and Todd bore no legal culpability. He wrote publicly about what he had witnessed and urged others to think about the conditions they were driving in. Friends reported that he stopped long-haul trucking immediately, switching to local gravel runs, and avoiding night driving whenever possible. In 2025, he is returning for Season 12 of Ice Road Truckers after an 8-year absence, reconnecting with Lisa Kelly and rejoining the Muskie Creek operation. He has acknowledged that the pull of the ice roads never fully released him, even after everything he saw on that Washington highway. Lisa Kelly is arguably the most recognizable name the show produced, the driver who entered a world that had been entirely defined by men and established herself through precision, calm under pressure, and a consistency that outlasted most of the people she worked alongside. She drove from Season 3 through 5, took a season off to recover from an injury that required more rest than a camera crew would allow, and returned for Seasons 7 through 11. She was not paid for her first several seasons and kept showing up anyway, letting her work make the argument for her. Her co-ownership of a trucking company with Daryl Ward meant that his death left her carrying both professional obligation and a personal loss simultaneously, managing a business while grieving the person she had built it with. In 2025, she is still driving in Alaska in her Freightliner Coronado, still navigating the same ice road she built her reputation on, and still living with her husband Travis Kelly and the horses that represent the grounded personal life she has maintained throughout everything the industry demanded of her. Her estimated net worth of approximately $5 million reflects decades of consistent work rather than a single dramatic moment. And her continued presence on the ice reflects a relationship with that world that goes past profession into something more like identity. Alex Debogorski is the only cast member who appeared in all 11 seasons of Ice Road Truckers. And the fact that he is alive and actively engaging with audiences in 2025 is not something anyone who tracks actuarial probability would necessarily have predicted. Before television, he had reportedly survived 37 bar fights in a single week, 11 attempted robberies, and an incident in a coal mine that nearly crushed him. He drove for decades with his window cracked in sub-zero temperatures, specifically to listen to the sound the ice made beneath him, treating those creaks and groans as information rather than atmosphere. He spent 3 days trapped in a snow-buried truck at 60 degrees below zero and emerged from it. After the show concluded, he became a touring speaker, a YouTube presence, and the host of a streaming program for truckers called Taillights. He published a memoir called King of the Road that gave fans the inside account of a life lived consistently at the edge of what survivable actually means. He is still married to his wife Louise and still in contact with all 11 of his children. His story is not one of tragedy or legal consequence. It is one of a man who understood the ice well enough to know exactly where the line between calculated risk and recklessness ran, and who spent 40 years walking it without crossing it in a direction that does not let you come back. VidIQ Sonnet 4.6 low.